latest rumors, for example, that I was somehow behind the attack on Abnegation, nothing more than divergent propaganda.
Janine says the attack was caused by divergence, but I don't think her statement would convince anyone. In the prior movie, Dauntless rounded up and executed a bunch of the Abnegation. Such a behavior would initiate an investigation, and since we know Candor has a truth serum, everyone would find out that the erudite was behind everything. Not to mention that 175 Dauntless were staying with Candor, and no one questioned why they left their faction. We see Janine's hand bandaged throughout the Insurgent, which tells us this movie picks up a few days after the last movie. Yet Eric shows no signs of his leg wound when Triss shot him on the prior movie. Why is Peter still running away with these guys? He was one of the bad guys in Divergent and only helped Triss because they threatened to kill him, so he would have tried to get back to Dauntless a long time ago.
I need to find out where the rest of the Dauntless are, then we can leave.
I wonder how they were going about trying to find where the rest of the Dauntless were. They have no transportation, no phones, and are just farming. So exactly how were they ever going to find anything? If Divergents were such a threat to their society, wouldn't they have these devices a long time ago and have mandatory testing throughout their lives? Also, it's pretty magical that it can tell not only if you are a Divergent, but also to what faction you belong.
The easy way or the hard way?
What happened to all that story that the factions were created to maintain the peace? Obviously a failed experiment, since this behavior here looks like they live in a police state. No way the bullets will go through 2 metal cars full of cargo and come out on the other side. Factionalists were shown in the movie as basically homeless living off the help of Abnegation, but I guess these guys are doing pretty well. Although I'm a little unsure how they would get all the guns, ammo and food to feed an army without any of the other factions noticing. What are these guards doing standing around waiting for them? How young Four's mother looks freaked me out a little bit at first, but Naomi Watts, the actress that plays the mother, is 46 years old, and Theo James, the actor that plays Four, is 30 years old, so it isn't quite as improbable as I thought, but still that would mean that she gave birth when she was 16 years old. I love how these guys are just hanging outside like they were waiting for them to show up. Also, it's not like they are hiding, so how come the main Dauntless faction doesn't come here to get them, since they seem to do whatever they want? Not to mention that aren't these guys technically factionless now since they left their faction, so they should live in the outskirts of the city? In the movie Divergent, Triss only has one tattoo, the 3 birds on her chest. In this movie, Triss now has a new tattoo on her right shoulder blade that we never see her get. Even worse is that Tori was hiding with the rest of the Dauntless at Candor, so that means Triss used a different tattoo artist.
You were accused of conspiring with your fellow Dauntless in the attack on Abnegation.
If there is a conspiracy with fellow Dauntless, does he mean only with Triss? Because as far as we know, there are the Dauntless that follow Janine, and there are the 175 Dauntless in Candor, and no one else has been arrested.
I was in a simulation controlled by Janine.
Triss confesses that she's Divergent and she was never in the simulation, but Four says he was in the simulation, which is sort of not true. Initially he wasn't in the simulation, he only was in the simulation after Janine captured him at the end of the Divergent movie. So much for the truth serum, right?
So you never harmed any of your fellow Dauntless. What was his name?
What about all the other Dauntless she punched, kicked and shot at? I guess extras don't really count for the truth serum. An attack on Candor's headquarters, wouldn't that by itself start a civil war?
Divergent. 10%.
How can someone be 10% divergent? Divergence is when someone takes the aptitude test to determine the best faction for himself or herself, but instead of the usual one faction, 2 or more come up as a result. In other words, the person doesn't just fit one faction. You either test in one faction or you don't. You can't test Dauntless and sorta kinda test 10% another faction. It's a pass or fail test.
Divergent. 100%.
Technically, she wouldn't be 100% divergent, but 20% each faction, unless the scanner is translating the scan and simplifying the result.
I found a way to live with the blood on my hands. Can you?
That's something silly to say to someone who trained as a police or military since a teenager. I'm sure he'll manage. Only 2 people get moving to help. All those dummies down there could start getting some pillows or something to break the imminent fall of their fellow Dauntless. That's one crappy faction hood if everyone is just frozen with shock. The green sports bra she has is gone when Four takes off her vest. Why would she be happy to leave? She turned herself in to stop the suicides, so by leaving, then they would be back at square one and the suicides would continue. Peter gives Trish the anesthesia shot, and somehow the super sophisticated machine that monitors her stats doesn't detect that she is still alive. Janine's dress switches between shots to the dress she was wearing the prior day. This is the most uncomfortable and unnecessary sim system ever. What happened to a nice, good old comfy chair? Not to mention the open bloody needle wounds whenever she finishes the sim. I guess Trish found a water fountain in the restroom and cleaned off all the blood on her face and ear. The jaws of open the door would have never fit between the shut doors in the first place to be able to pry them open. Check how there is no gap between the doors. The Divergents knew they were in a sim and they knew each faction virtue was being tested, and yet they failed the tests and died. But just look at how easy this last Amnesty test was. You basically sit and chill and do nothing. Nailed it. And the whole army invades the Erudite headquarters and sneak into the simulation room without sounding any alarms. After an hour, I'm sure someone will say, "Man, we should have brought our trucks, supplies and water. Whose idea was just to walk into the unknown anyway? And why would they go unprepared to beyond the wall where..."
I come from outside the wall, where we have all but destroyed each other.
Where's your scary boyfriend?
Probably off doing scary boyfriend things.